Seahawks coach Pete Carroll was fined $10,000 for walking onto the field during the final minute of a loss Sunday at Jacksonville. Pete Carroll knew a fine was coming the minute he walked onto the field at Jacksonville in the late going of Sunday's 2024 loss to the Jaguars. Germain Ifedi still has no idea why he got a penalty, let alone a fine. And if anyone on the outside was surprised that Michael Bennett did not get a fine, the Seahawks were not. As expected, the Seahawks got hit hard in the pocketbook by the NFL when fines were revealed Friday for the chaotic events out of the Jaguars game. Carroll and 3 Seahawks players were docked a combined $52,539 by the NFL for varying penalties. Carroll was fined $10,000 for walking onto the field, while Ifedi, Seattle's right tackle, was fined $24,309 for what was termed as verbal abuse of a ref for a penalty he drew in the first quarter. Defensive linemen Quinton Jefferson and Sheldon Richardson were each fined $9,115 for the unnecessary roughness penalties they drew that got them ejected in the final minute, and Jacksonville running back Leonard Fournette was also fined $12,154. Jefferson may also have been fined for approaching the stands to confront fans who threw objects in his direction at the end of the game, but that was not disclosed. The Seahawks were told Monday that no players would be suspended. That decision was made early since Seattle would have needed to add players to its roster to make up for any who would be suspended. The NFL did not fine Bennett, who attempted to swipe the ball while the Jaguars were in kneel-down mode to run out the clock, and dived at center Brandon Linder, who sparked the tussles that led to the incidents involving Carroll, Richardson and Jefferson. Carroll said that Bennett not getting fined was what he expected. "Yeah, he did what I said he did," said Carroll, who had insisted earlier in the week that Bennett was merely trying to force a fumble by swiping at the center's snap. "That's what happened there, and they got tangled up a little bit." As for Carroll, he said he knew the minute he walked on the field to try to calm things down that he'd get a penalty, and he also knew that, at that point, the game was over and getting a penalty didn't matter. "That was part of the knowing on the way out there," he said. "Just something that needed to be done at the time." Carroll said it was the first fine had drawn for that offense. Coaches are allowed on the field only to check on injured players. And he laughed that at least the money goes to a good cause. All fine money goes to 2 programs for former players, the NFL Foundation to the NFL Player Care Foundation and the Gene Upshaw Players Association's Players Assistance Trust. "This time of year, giving is everything," Carroll said. Jaguars offensive line coach Pat Flaherty and wide receiver coach Keenan McCardle also were fined $10,000 for the same offense. Ifedi was fined for what was termed as verbal abuse of an official. On the play, which occurred in the first quarter, Ifedi was called for holding. But a pass interference penalty on the Jaguars negated the penalty. Ifedi then drew a flag for taunting. Ifedi said Friday he had no idea what he said to draw the flag, and that the officials did not tell him anything. As for the fine, he said he had no comment and didn't know if he would try to appeal but would look into that next week. Ifedi got a hefty penalty because it was deemed to be a second offense. The penalty was one of 4 Ifedi drew in the game, though only 2 were enforced, and he has an NFL high of 17 for the season as well as an NFL high 13 that have been enforced. Carroll noted that the Jags were twice called for illegal hands to the face against Ifedi. "Well, he just needs to keep growing," Carroll said. "He needs to keep growing. It's just being comfortable with the situation, making good choices and good decisions. We got a little bit crazy last week and there was a number of penalties that weren't called against the guys playing on him, and they went after him pretty good. He handled that as the game went on." Ifedi downplayed that the game was any different from any other. "I mean, it was a competitive game from the start," said Ifedi. "I didn't think anybody was intentionally doing anything to each other. I just thought it was a real competitive game, and I didn't think anything crazy was going on out there. It was just a really competitive game against a really good team. The things that happened, they happened. But we've got to move on." Carroll and offensive line coach Tom Cable each said this week that players can earn reputations for penalties, suggesting that opponents can try to goad players into getting them and that officials can pay more attention to players they know get a lot of flags. "I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way," Ifedi said. "Maybe. If so, you've just got to be that much more right if that is the case, but you've just got to keep doing right. And the goal is always to do right because people are waiting for you to do something out of hand. But I don't go in thinking anybody is targeting me or anything. Just play your game and try to do right, and if something happens you move on and you try to do right some more."